Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this meeting of the Council. Before we begin, I would just like to remind everyone that the meeting will be shown live on the Internet. It will also be stored in the Council's webcast archive and will be available for viewing at a later date. I have the discretion to suspend or stop filming if, in my opinion, allowing filming is to be continued would affect the proceeding of the meeting. Can I again remind you that microphones must be switched on before you start to speak and switched off immediately when you finish speaking. I would also remind councillors that there is no need to stand as the cameras will focus on you. Item 1, do we have any apologies for absence?
Thank you, Provost. We have 4 apologies this evening. Deputy Provost Cunningham, Councillors Devlin, Grant and O'Kane.
Thank you. Declarations of interest. The Councillors' Code of Conduct requires elected members to declare any financial or non-financial interest they may have in any of the items on the agenda. Do any members have any declarations of interest to make? Thank you. Item 3. The minute of the meeting of the Council held on the 23rd of March 2016 is submitted for approval as a correct record and for signature. Is that in order? Okay. Item 4. Minutes of meetings of the period 24th of March to the 19th of April are submitted for approval as a correct record. Is that in order? Does anyone have any questions on the minutes? Okay. Councillor Swift. Councillor Swift. Sorry.
Thank you very much, Provost. Just one question. It's page 1850 in the minutes. I'll just give people time. Thank you, Provost. Local Government Benchmarking Framework 2014-15 performance. And as the report states, broadly the performance overall is pretty good. However, there are a few areas that were markedly below par in our performance, and none of them are noted. I think for balance's sake, it might be useful to have these sort of things in the minutes so that we understand where the Council has a shortfall in performance, and even in the minute, what we're doing to address it. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you, Provost. Can I give the Council a progress update on the Eastwood Health and Care Centre? We are still actually awaiting the formal handover date from the contractor. However, it is anticipated that handover will be by the end of April 2016. April, yes. That's when we start having access. As I'm going to explain, we'll have to flit in. Okay. Following which an intensive commissioning phase will take place. The centre will be operational in the summer with services and staff moving in during June and July 2016. We are working with East Renfrewshire Council Corporate Communications to develop a comprehensive public information strategy for the new centre, which we will implement in partnership with NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde once the handover and commissioning dates are finally confirmed. There's been considerable concern about transport to the new centre. In terms of travel, we've been working with Strathclyde Passenger Transport and colleagues in Environment and have agreed to test a new bus route to serve Eastwood Health and Care Centre in addition to the existing 374 hourly service. The new 375 service will pass the sites of all the GP practices moving into the centre. The route has been planned to include the local areas where we expect the greatest demand for a bus service based on feedback from our travel survey. We will test the new route for 6 months, monitoring take-up of both the 375 and the impact on the 374 service. A new combined timetable for both services will be publicised prior to the move to the centre. Between the two services, there should be 2 buses per hour passing the new centre between 9:30 a.m. and 5:30 p.m. The 375 will run from Spears Bridge, stopping at Rookenglen Road, Rowallen Road, Robsley Road, Orchard Park Avenue, Orchard Drive, Fenwick Road, Eastwood Mains Road, Busby Road and circle at Shetton's Roundabout. Busby Road, Clarkson Avenue, Netherley Road and Brentfield Road. The 374 runs from 7:15 to 18:40 and I have a link if members are interested where you can access the 374 timetable with a link with SPT. SPT also operates the MyBus, which is a bookable bus service offering door-to-door transport. MyBus can be used for GP appointments and will pick up and drop off as close as possible to the destination. All vehicles are low floor and wheelchair friendly. Normal bus service fares apply and can be checked at the time of booking. National entitlement cards, zone cards and day tickets are all valid, and MyBus can serve the new Eastwood Health and Care Centre. Community Transport East Renfrewshire also operate your Wee Red bus. There's a link for that too if members are interested, which along with volunteer drivers can provide transport to medical appointments. Users need to be referred to the service from their GP surgery and they can book the appointments by telephone, giving at least 1 week's notice. It's also worthy of note that Williamwood Railway Station is immediately adjacent to the new Eastwood Health and Care Centre, with services every 30 minutes from Whitecraigs and Muirend in either direction. We are arranging orientation visits which will take place during May, and Pamela Gomez of the HSCP will be contacting you regarding these. The first visit will take place in the middle of May and there will be a series after that. We will also be asking members of the public to be involved in testing public-facing facilities and our wayfinding strategy prior to the centre opening. Thank you. That concludes.
Thank you, Councillor Lafferty. That was all very good news. It's one of the things that most members of the public have complained about. Well, in my experience, most members of the public have complained about. So thank you very much for your information. We now move on to item 8, statements by representatives of joint boards, committees and Community Justice Authority. I have not been advised of any statements. Item 9, provost engagements. This is the usual civic engagements and civic duties report. It is here for information and noted. I would just like to add that we had the Pensioners' Tea Party in the Glasgow City Hotel on Sunday there, and I would like to thank Councillor Cunningham for arranging it, and Linda, my secretary, who did most of the work in organising buses, etc. We had about 400 people at it, so it's a well worth effort.
Perhaps that's why you were talking about.
Yes, okay. Accept it. Is this agreed? Thank you. Item 10, East Renfrewshire's Integration Joint Board. This report has been prepared by the Chief Executive to provide clarification on the responsibilities of the new IJB and the relationship between the Council and the IJB. Are there any questions or comments? Right, take Councillor Wallace first and then Councillor McCaskill.
Thank you, Provost. Just with reference to para 18, which refers to internal audit and the Council's Audit and Scrutiny Committee. In the absence of having any definitive instruction as to what the scope of the Audit and Scrutiny Committee is and overseeing the activities of the HSCP, we can only assume that it's business as usual. It's been about 7 months since the report on the H&SC integration from the Audit Accounts Commission. Last month we had the changing models of the health and social care. I know there's another report coming through, Social Work in Scotland. The Audit and Scrutiny Committee invariably gets a report back on the Council's response. I wonder if the convener for health could maybe advise on whether these reports or responses will be forthcoming. Thank you.
I'm not absolutely sure which reports you're referring to, so I maybe ask Mrs Murray first of all to confirm the reports for us.
I think they're general Audit Scotland reports on integration in Scotland nationally. We have done a response to the first of the series of 3 to the IJB's Audit and Performance Committee. Very happy to put the same report to Audit and Scrutiny.
Thanks very much, Provost. Ideal. Thank you. Councillor McCaskill, you want to come in?
I'm obliged, Provost. When I can refer to page 36, paragraph 10, bullet point 2, and in relation to the same question, page 38, paragraph 23. Excuse me. Now, you will note in page 36, bullet point 2, when the Council or NHS delegates funding to the IJB, it's the IJB who will determine how the funding will be spent. If I can then refer to paragraph 23, an annual report of the IJB HSCC will be presented to the Council annually. What it doesn't make clear in this paragraph is will this include a balance sheet?
The IJB itself is an organisation in its own right. The IJB will actually have to prepare annual accounts. Now, I've not yet seen the format of the annual report. I imagine there'll be some reference to finance in it. I think, depending on timing, in fact, I'll refer to Julie. I'm not sure in terms of timing, but there will be annual accounts, which will, of course, be public documents for the IJB, and will go through the IJB and the IJB Audit Committee for their approval, which will give all the funds. What I would want to emphasise is the funding of the IJB is actually very, very simple. There'll be a small number of transactions into the IJB from the NHS and from the Council, and a small number of transactions back out from to both the NHS and the Council. So the actual accounts of the IJB in any balance sheet will actually be very, very simple. Whether Julie intends putting the balance sheet into the annual report, I'll maybe refer to her to answer.
There is the answer is I'm not quite sure at the moment. There is some quite detailed guidance that has just come out from Scottish Government around what should be in the performance reports. So Candy Millard and myself are working through that, but we do plan to take a report to Council in June.
Thank you.
Okay. Can we note the report and the recommendations? Okay. Item 11, Contract Standing Orders Revision. The report is asking us to approve, amend contract standing orders and to take immediate effect, and that pending the conclusion of the review and financial regulations. In the event of conflict of the new report, standing orders will take precedent. Now, I have a correction that I must inform you about. On page 50, it should say 9/3, not 10/3. Are there any questions? Councillor McAlpine.
Thank you, Provost.
This report is going to tidy up and improve, I hope, a number of procedures that we have for the council. These changes have been made which are prompted by a few things. Firstly being the new statutory and legal changes from Europe and in UK law which took effect as of Monday. Second, the need to encourage further participation of small and medium-sized enterprises, so we're keen to do that for the council. Third, to reduce bureaucracy in the standing orders process, to encourage more small local businesses to get involved with bidding for East Renfrewshire Council services. And fourth, ensuring we get the best value for the council. I think you should note at page 40, paragraph 9, now quick quote now applies for goods and services for the value of £10,000 to £50,000 and then £20,000 to £150,000 for works. So I hope, Provost, that smaller East Rend firms can now tender as they don't need to go through the full tendering process now. So I hope these new procedures, simple language and plain English, will encourage more local firms to get involved with East Renfrewshire Council bidding. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McAlpine. Does anyone have any questions for Councillor McAlpine?
Thank you very much, Provost. I welcome the opening up of contracts to local businesses. I also have some concerns that we have increased a lot of the thresholds very substantially. And I wonder how it is that we're going to, is it still through the OJEU, I think, that we're going to put these out for tender?
Mr. Mahan.
We have increased the thresholds, but it tends to be at the lower end of the overall spectrum. Throughout the procurement regime, whether it's on a national level or a European level, goods and services are distinguished from works contracts, and the threshold levels vary vastly. On a national level, goods and services, the threshold is £50,000. Works, it's £2 million. So in changing the thresholds, as has already been described, we're merely reflecting the same processes that are prevalent on a national and a European level at a local level. As far as the European regime, the necessity to advertise through OJEU, that will still apply to us as it has always done, and to do otherwise would be non-compliant with the law, so we won't be varying anything like that. Contracts of a European level will still be advertised as appropriate.
Councillor Buchanan, do you want to come in?
Yes, thanks, Provost. Yeah, just again to welcome this report, and I think one of the aspects that we often find is that small and medium enterprises are not necessarily either aware of the contracts or indeed in a position to be able to bid for them. And a piece of work has been going on that we have our own supplier development programme, which is a company owned by the local authorities. It's recently expanded to cover all 32 local authorities, and we run courses to ensure that across Scotland small and medium enterprises are tender ready. So they're given the skills, they can sign up to the programme to make sure that they're aware that contracts, they can view the contracts, see what's becoming available, and indeed work together and come together in order to try and come forward with a tender process and apply the tender process in order that they can hopefully take on some of these contracts. Hopefully, in the long term, this will follow through. It's part of the simplification that has come down the line from the EU because it's been recognised that that has been a problem for some years. So hopefully we're moving in the right direction, and that more and more of our small, medium enterprises will be tender ready and will be able to bid for some of these contracts, keeping jobs in our local area. So it's very much a welcomed asset.
Thank you, Councillor Buchanan. Councillor Swift, are you quite happy? Item 12, Clyde Valley Residual Waste Contract. This report provides an update in relation to the Clyde Valley Residual Waste Project and is seeking agreement to enter into an agreement with partner councils and for North Lanarkshire Council as lead partner to enter into an agreement with the contractor. The full list of recommendations is at page 53 of your papers. Are there any questions or comments? Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Provost. I'd just like to commend the Environment Department staff for all the work they've done over the past 2-3 years, and they have done an excellent job, and I don't think we could have done the same job with other folk. I'd just like to thank them very much.
Thank you, Councillor Miller. Any other?
Thank you, Provost. It's two questions, really. If not landfill, because it's not going to be landfill, how is this waste going to be got rid of, is the first question. And the second is, it's a very long contract, and we have, people often complain about the nature of contracts that are very, very long, and we are, as in corporately, generally, councils sign up for these 25-year contracts, and actually, do you know what? It was maybe not the right thing to do, but with the benefit of hindsight. But we don't have hindsight. So can I ask what circumstances would allow us to exit the contract without penalties? So it's two questions.
Mr. Corrie, could you take this question?
Thanks, Councillor Swift. To answer your first question, it's an energy from waste plant. So that instead of burning, you're capturing the energy and the heat from the plant, and that goes obviously to provide energy to the grid. Your second point, it's a 25-year contract because it's essentially a design and build contract. The market just wouldn't be interested in any shorter term arrangements. This is a brand new type of technology that's getting used to find an alternative home for away from landfill. So that's what we had to do. That was the advice we had from our consultants.
Okay, Councillor Swift.
Thank you, Mr. Corrie. Are there any circumstances that would allow us to exit the contract? Because I'm sure there must be some circumstances that would allow us to exit the contract.
It's Mr. Mahon.
Mahon.
Yeah, I've been involved in the negotiations and drafting around the contract, along with legal officers from the various councils who are involved in the project. There are grounds for termination of the contract. They tend to centre on defaults on the part of the contractor and the obligations that they have under the contract. Obviously, as is standard with any contract of this nature, if a party wished to withdraw from the contract in the absence of default, there would be penalties payable, and that will be the case with this contract as well. However, there's been a lot of scrutiny in terms of the contract terms. There's been a lot of discussion. The actual choice of contractor went through a process of negotiation. And on that basis, the various legal officers certainly are satisfied that the ultimate contract provides adequate safety and security for the local authorities that are participating in this, and is reflective of general commercial contracts of this nature.
Can we approve the report and recommendations?
Page 60, number 9, it lists the areas that they're going to address for parking charges. Clarkson Goodyard, adjacent to it's a library car park. If something isn't done with the library car park, the vehicles will move from the Goodyard car park into the library car park. It also says that the reasons these areas were chosen, all car parks are used by both commuters and shoppers. There's little room for displacement parking around these locations. Within 150 yards, there's umpteen streets, and at present, every one of the streets is gridlocked with people going for trains. So maybe they can work along the roads because they're coming up to do the traffic regulation survey for these areas. Possibly yellow lines going in would help. And the last part, or two parts, it would be helpful if we knew what they were proposing to charge
And also, why do we not have the car park here on it? The public will look and say, every car park down there, yep, that's fine, but the council's all right.
Councillor Buchanan.
I think maybe I can touch on, I appreciate some of the comments that Ralph has. This is actually, the reason there's no cost on it, this is to put the order in place to enable us to charge. That's the first thing. So once we have the order, like any traffic regulation order, we then have the ability to bring in parking charges. Those sites have been identified because we believe that they are ones which can, A, the parking can be improved, but B, we think that there is a viability there in order to make sure that that can work for us. We all, I think, get complaints about parking on a regular basis, either the lack of it or not being able to get a space, or indeed people parking shop owners' businesses in our areas not getting the benefit of it because people park travelling to Glasgow, for example, or elsewhere, but don't necessarily contribute to our local economy. Part of this is about looking at ways and how we can manage that process much better. Most of our neighbouring authorities, for example, all charge for parking, so we tend to have people coming from other authorities, parking all day here, and then moving on. We need to try and manage that better. This order gives us that ability to start looking at those proposals. If and when we bring forward the papers on charges, that will obviously come forward to Council again and being looked at. It also ties in with the other traffic regulation orders that we have in order to manage the whole process much more effectively, in order that we can deliver for the people of East Renfrewshire. It's not set up as a money-making scheme. It's about ensuring that we can deliver for people. We can make sure that people have the opportunity to park, and we can try and deliver in conjunction with that for our businesses, who are the ones who often suffer because of it. So we need to look at all of those things when charges do come forward. But in the first instance, we need the ability to do that. I don't know if Mr Corrie wants to come in and add anything else, or indeed Mr Cahill, but certainly it's about giving us that ability to ensure that we can deliver for people in East Renfrewshire.
Councillor Green, and then I'll come back.
Thank you very much, Provost. Where I understand why we need on-street parking and the businesses need the traffic to turn over and for footfall, etc., I don't really understand why we need it at Park and Ride, for example, in Kingston Road in Neilston or Patterton Station, where I thought that we were trying to encourage people to park all day and not take their cars into city centre for environmental reasons. Thank you.
So Buchanan, do you want to come back in on this? Or?
Again, it comes back to people travelling into the area and utilising a lot of those services that we have, because we are not charging for parking. There is a balance to be struck between ensuring that we can provide good services into Glasgow, the park and ride facilities, etc., and we can work in conjunction with our partners on that. But we need the ability to be able to look at all of those aspects, because without the order in place, we can't do anything. And one of the biggest complaints that we get is that people are coming in, parking, leaving some places, abandoning their cars, and we can't do very much about it. I think we see, Clarkson Goodjab as a prime example of that. So we need the ability to be able to try and tackle it, and this is the first part of that process.
Councillor Wallace.
Thank you. My concern here, in my own particular ward of Giffnock-Thornley Bank, I'm looking at the Giffnock station. From Monday to Friday, it's chock-a-block, absolutely no chance of anybody who's wanting to use the shops around that area of using that car park. Now, one suggestion would be that perhaps by charging that, it may displace some cars. The other concern is that by displacing these cars, I don't know if anybody's seen the length and breadth of Fenwick Road, up the Marys as well. It is already bad with cars moving up there who are doing their own parking and riding, and I think once we start charging for that, we might find that actually getting an awful lot worse. I do see that there's £200,000 has been sort of earmarked, as you like, as sort of an idea of how much revenue could be raised by charging for the parking. My concern is how much of that £200,000 is going to be out the pockets of local businesses. Thank you.
Councillor Gilbert and then Councillor Robertson.
Provost, I'm of the same opinion from a Patterton Country Park point of view. It sounds, the way it's actually entered on this makes it sound as if the people who are actually parking their cars there are using it to visit the park. It's nothing to do with that. It's purely and simply that people who are, use it myself when I'm going to Strathclyde Partnership for Transport meetings in town, and the fact that I use that car park, and that car park is now used very frequently. So from that point of view, it is ludicrous for people who are actually living in the area to park the car in there and then suddenly say, oh, now I'm being charged, and they won't use it, which means actually that more and more people will have to find other places to park the car because they're going to be charged at Patterton. So I totally refute this idea that, oh yes, to get some cash in for the council, the people can just start paying for the country park. No, sorry, because it's an essential car park. In fact, it was regarded as essential as soon as SBT established the car park. So it is all to do with people using that to get their vehicles or to get into town and being able to know that it's a good car park to use. So, sorry, I disagree with the motion. Thank you.
Councillor Robertson.
I'm sorry to say I disagree with that. I think it's about time we charge for the car parks. The council's short of money, so we need to get money in. If the charges are reasonable, then it's fine. But I was going to come back to, nobody answered the question, why is the headquarters car park not assessed in it if we're looking to make revenue from it? It's the largest car park we've got, I would think.
Councillor Miller, and then...
Thank you, Provost. I actually quite agree with Councillor Robertson. There's one or two extra car parks that could be added, such as Murray Drive and Clarkson, which is mainly all parking riders coming from East Kilbride. So surely that if we're going to charge other folk. But what about these ones that are getting charged on Saturdays and Sundays? Could we not dispense with charges on a weekend?
Councillor Buchanan, do you want to come back in now?
Some of the officers, but this doesn't actually touch on the charges. This is the ability to set charges, and the charges would then be discussed on separate papers when they come forward. That would be the first thing I would say, so that's why there's nothing mentioned in here about how much it will be and what those charges will be, because that's a separate entity. This just gives us the ability to do so in the first instance. That will bring the officers in and let them give them the background to that.
Mrs Fraser.
Thank you, Chair. We looked at several car parks, and we looked at a certain size of car park as well, because obviously there are things that we have to, the machinery that we have to buy for those car parks, and how much we're able to put towards out of the money that has been allocated to us in the coming financial year. So that kind of drove some of the discussions about how the sizes we're looking for. So the Murray Drive car park is a strange one because it looks as if it's on street, but it is actually off street because it's not in the road. And it's one that we did talk about, and we decided to discount that because, again, it is so close to the railway station, and we think that the Clarkson Goodyard car park is the one that we get most complaints about for people who are parking there all day, overnight, using it as perhaps their storage for some of their vehicles. And we felt that that was one where we really needed to tackle within the town centre for a start. So yes, there has been sort of this balance about which car parks do we look at, which ones do we not look at. We also are aware that there are other key stakeholders that we've got to discuss things with, which is why we've brought forward this report at this time, to allow us to be able to go and speak to people such as Network Rail and ScotRail, particularly for the Giffnock Town Centre car park. So really there is no detail in this report at all, for the simple reason that we need your authority to look at changing the policy of actually bringing in some off-street parking charges, so that we have the ability now to go and speak to those others who are involved, such as outside organisations like Network Rail in particular, and ScotRail, who are going to be affected by the off-street
charges. Similarly, we need to speak to the library service. Councillor Robertson's correct. We need to think about how we deal with the library in Clarkson, and we need to be able to talk to other officers and start that debate so that we're able to have an informed debate when the actual traffic regulation order is brought forward into the public domain, because those things will then be in the traffic regulation order to do with what car parks we're looking at in detail, what the charges are going to be, because it could be that there's different charges in different car parks. So all that kind of thing will be in the mix within the traffic regulation order, and that is why there is no real detail in this report.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Lafferty, first of all.
Okay, thanks, Provost. I'm reassured that at least this measure will be subject to a consultation process, so we will get the views of the public. I think we have to be very wary of unforeseen consequences of any change to the current patterns of free parking or charging. Though the point is well made that we are fairly unique as a local authority in not making any charge. And the problem seems to be it's the all-day parking at car parks adjacent to stations. Strictly speaking, that is not of benefit to East Renfrewshire. That benefits our neighbours, where the destination of the folk. They're coming here, they're dumping their cars for free because they can't get parking in Glasgow. And they're travelling on that from a general position of someone who favours sustainability. That is great, but we have to consider our own position in East Renfrewshire. If someone wishes to do that, then there has to be some cost that they have to help us meet. Fairly modest one, I think.
Thank you, Councillor Lafferty. Councillor Swift.
Thank you, Provost. It's a couple of things. First, I see we're going to spend £155,000 on equipment. And I'm sure most of the members know there are mobile-based systems that people go onto their smartphone, log on, put their registration number in. We don't have any equipment. It's all done online. And we've just had a presentation on how we're going digital. Why would we choose to buy equipment that we don't need when we could do it all digitally and people just do it that way? That's the first question. The other thing I wanted to say that I found quite illustrative from my colleague Councillor Miller is, I know it's not directly related to this paper, but actually most businesses here will do most of their business over the weekend when people aren't working, and I think giving parking for free over the weekend will help local businesses.
Provost, I'm conscious that particularly in relation to Councillor Robertson's question, we haven't really given a reply. Firstly, I'd try and sweep up some of the statements here what Councillor Swift had said about weekend charging or weekends free. We can look at all of that as part of the charging order. This is about managing parking. It's not about generating income, and we've had discussions around that. I think in relation to Councillor Robertson's outstanding point was that there's nothing been proposed here around Eastwood HQ. And the reason for that, and we've had discussions about that, is that it's not just staff that are at HQ, and if you look at the simple criteria we applied in paragraph 10, there's the 3 bullet points about commuters and shoppers, room for displacement, and car parks are large enough to provide financial returns. You've got to remember that that car park out there is for serving visitors to HQ. It's also for serving the leisure centre, theatre users, possibly users of the school, and staff, quite clearly. So how did you then start to try to segregate that and put in individual elements of charging, particularly, I guess, you're probably thinking aimed for staff? The other issue is that if given the location of Eastwood Park and its isolation, if you did put in charging, however you might manage to do it for all those different users, then potentially you face really significant displacement issues, because the only place to go is across the road into Whitegrave particular area. Also, if you start to talk about or start to compare and contrast and think about staff users in relation to the car park, and don't think for 1 minute I'm an advocate of the council providing car parking spaces for staff. We certainly wouldn't do it for you in Glasgow. But you have to think then, so if you apply a policy for staff, if that's what your angle is, what would be our policy then in relation to the parking at Barhead Main Street What would be our policy in relation to staff parking at Spears Bridge? What would be our policy in relation to staff car parking within schools? What would be our policy towards, say, staff car parking in our joint premises run through the HSCCP, such as our Barhead Health Centres and Eastwood Health Centres, which have got massive car parking associated with them, and quite a lot of that is allocated for staff. So I don't think it's a simple issue. So again, we go back to where we were and the 3 criteria that we picked up as paragraph 10, at least as a starting point to allow us to take this project forward and then learn as we go along. I don't know if that helps, Councillor Robertson.
Councillor Riley, you were wanting in.
Thanks, Provost. Whilst I respect everything all my other colleagues have said, and I know parking's a massive problem, particularly in Barhead at the moment with the railway bridge being out, all the disruption, I just hope it's not the thin edge of a very big wedge, because our policy in the parking in Barhead Main Street could change in the future. Who knows? It's quite ineffective at the moment, actually, with the 30 minutes thing. You know, so it worries me slightly, but it's early days yet. It's only to empower the officers to come forward with their proposals. I hope if the proposals do come forward, at least it'll be a small charge. And I'd like to think it says here about implications here, sustainability and equality. I hope we don't get into a bargaining fight between one side of the authority and another as to who's paying the biggest charges for parking. That's all.
I agree with virtually everything that Mr Cahill says, but I feel if it had been on the actual paper and then you come back with the responses that it's complicated, you've got the leisure facilities, the school and everything else, the public would at least see that you're addressing this area and taking it into account. They're not just saying, good enough for us, but we'll leave the rest of them to pay. I think every point he made's relevant.
Just a point of clarification. It seems such a long time ago since you spoke, Sharon, but could I ask, can other car parks be added into this one?
Mrs Fraser?
Yes, if the members would like us to look at those, we can look at what the implications are and look at what the various cost implications would be. And I take Councillor Swift's point that we are moving towards a digital age, but there are a lot of people in this authority who still work in cash, still use cheques, which is one of the reasons that we still very much accept cheques, and we get a pile of cheques in every day for parking fines. They don't like paying online. Many people still don't like paying online. I don't know if it's a generation thing. The equipment that we have looked at, that we've talked to the suppliers about, is we're looking at it being future-proofed so that it does have all the smart technology to be able to use cards and all these sort of things as well. The Ringo system that they're using in Glasgow, where you ring up and pay for your parking, is a completely different system to some of the stuff that's ongoing at the moment in the parking world. But I can see that is something which will more and more people who are involved in parking will start to look at. It's a completely different management system and how you actually deal with it. It's all sort of cloud-based and everything, whereas it's not physically based. Although the stuff that we're looking at is virtual-based as well in some ways, it's not the same kind of platform that it sits on. But yes, I don't think we're at a generation yet who are ready to say no money.
There's been quite a few points raised, a lot of points raised. Now, sorry, no, I think that we've covered quite a lot of ground, and I think the officers will take on board everything that's been said, and I'm quite sure when they come back with the proposals they'll be well scrutinised. So I would like to move on. Can we approve the proposals? Thank you. Item 14, East Renfrewshire Local Access Forum. This report is seeking agreement to the dissolution of the current East Renfrewshire Local Access Forum and authority for the Director of the Environment to establish a new forum. Are there any questions or comments to the report? Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Provost. I'd just like to ask, since there has been no meetings of the Access Forum since, for the last 3 years, I know the new secretary, or the secretary took over from Jim Williamson, the excellent Mark Brand, had a couple of meetings. and he has never, or from what I heard, that he was seconded to somewhere else. There has never been another meeting held in the 3 years since then. Will the council supply the secretarial work for that, and will it be able to bring the forum forward?
The new forum?
The new forum.
Councillor Waters.
Thanks, Provost. I can give that assurance to Councillor Miller. Under the Act, there's a statutory requirement in the Council to appoint members to the forum. And I think there's at the very least a moral, if not legal obligation that goes along with that we would have to support the members of the forum when appointed and the work of the forum as it goes on. So that's certainly our intention.
Thank you, Provost. Councillor Miller says there's not been a meeting for 3 years. In the first sentence, I'll just read the final few words. That meets the statutory requirements set out in the Land Reform Scotland Act, because we would want that it would obey the law. Are we currently not? Because that sentence reads as though we're not sure that we're actually upholding the law in the way I read it. So are we being legal?
Councillor Waters.
Thank you, Provost. I'm going to answer this one cautiously because Councillor Swift has chosen his question carefully. The Council is not in default of any law, but there are statutory requirements on the forum which in its current iteration it's not meeting, which is why the proposal put forward by the Director is to dissolve it and start afresh. Hope that answers Councillor Swift's question.
Councillor Swift, okay.
I'm very, very happy with the answer, Councillor Waters. So there is a problem here. I just don't understand why there hasn't been a meeting for the last 3 years for something that should be meeting reasonably regularly. Could somebody answer why we haven't had a meeting in the last 3 years?
Mrs McCartney, if you wish to come in.
Yes, thank you, Chair. The meetings that were taking place, as you'll see from the paper, it was actually, when it was set up, it was quite a large forum. There was, 20, 30 people involved in the forum to start with. Over time, the members of the forum started kind of declining to come, and it ended up being a very small group of people who turned up, maybe just a couple of people at any one time. There were staffing issues that meant that the department couldn't support the forum at certain times in terms of administrative support, and basically the forum just ceased to meet. We did not aim to start it back up again. We didn't push to start it back up again, and the forum himself did push to start the meetings back up again. There is no one particular person or particular groups to blame. In my opinion, from my experience and memory, the forum just withered. If that answers your question.
Councillor McAlpine, do you wish to come in?
Yes, I'm delighted to see this forum getting reinvigorated and hopefully get some new blood. I see from paragraph 14 that the Eastwood Ramblers are going to be part of that, and I've enjoyed myself rambling up and down hillsides, and we hope that the Eastwood Ramblers enjoy that as well.
Councillor Lafferty, do you wish to come in?
I think Councillor McAlpin has covered most of the point I was going to make. Yes, invariably. But I was going to suggest to the convener, Councillor Waters, that as far as possible, when appointing members, it's perhaps new people who will bring fresh enthusiasm to sustain this very worthwhile group.
Can we approve the recommendations?
Yes.